When Joan Crawford passed away in 1977, Hollywood paused to honor a woman who had shaped the golden age of cinema through sheer determination and reinvention. She was celebrated as a self-made star who rose from poverty to power, crafting one of the most carefully managed public images the industry had ever seen. Yet even as tributes poured in, there was an unspoken awareness that Crawford's life had always contained contradictions. Her strength was undeniable, but so was the mystery that followed her. In the days after her death, as her estate was prepared and her private world slowly opened, fascination replaced mourning. Friends, family, and fans began to sense that the story of Joan Crawford did not end neatly with a curtain call. Instead, it invited deeper reflection on how survival, ambition, and control can shape not only a career but an entire life, leaving behind questions that linger long after the applause fades. A childhood forged in hardship. Born Lucille Fay Lesieur, in the early years of the 20th century, Joan Crawford's beginnings were marked by instability and struggle. Her father left the family early, and her mother was forced to navigate hardship while raising two children with limited means. Crawford learned responsibility young, taking on work that demanded both physical effort and emotional endurance. A serious childhood injury threatened her mobility and introduced a lifelong fear of illness, an experience that would quietly influence her later habits and need for order. These early challenges shaped her resolve to escape poverty at all costs. Dance became her path forward, not simply as an art form, but as a ticket to survival. Long before Hollywood noticed her, Crawford had already developed the discipline and relentless work ethic that would define her career. Her ambition was not born from vanity, but from necessity, a determination never to return to the life she had known, becoming Joan Crawford. The transformation from Lucille Lesieur to Joan Crawford was more than a name change. It was a complete reinvention. When she signed with MGM in the mid-1920s, the studio refined her image with precision, shaping her into a symbol of modern womanhood. Crawford embraced the process fully, understanding that success required total commitment. She worked tirelessly, rehearsing until exhaustion and pushing her body beyond its limits to deliver perfection on screen. Films like Our Dancing Daughters captured the spirit of the era and cemented her place as a rising star. Audiences connected with her authenticity and drive, sensing that her performances carried lived experience rather than illusion. Crawford's ascent mirrored the dreams of many Americans during uncertain times, and her characters often reflected resilience and self-made success. Behind the glamour, however, she remained intensely focused on control, believing that discipline was the only way to protect everything she had built: stardom, rivalries, and pressure. By the 1930s, Joan Crawford was one of MGM's most recognizable faces, admired for roles that resonated deeply during the Great Depression. Her on-screen portrayals of women climbing out of hardship felt personal, and audiences responded with loyalty. Yet success within the studio system came with rivalry and constant comparison. Crawford often found herself competing for prestige against other leading actresses, navigating an environment where personal relationships and studio politics influenced opportunities. While she proved her box office strength time and again, the pressure to remain relevant was relentless. Privately, her life reflected similar instability. Marriages came and went, marked by emotional strain and unmet expectations. Despite public smiles, Crawford struggled with insecurity and the fear of losing her place. The contrast between her confident image and her private anxieties grew sharper, reinforcing her belief that survival required vigilance, self-control, and an unyielding grip on her personal world. Motherhood and public appearances. Unable to have biological children, Joan Crawford turned to adoption and presented herself as a devoted mother, often photographed with her children in carefully staged moments of domestic happiness. To the public, these images reinforced her identity as both a powerful star and a nurturing parent. Inside the home, however, family life was reportedly complex and emotionally charged. Crawford's expectations were high, shaped by her own discipline and fear of chaos. Those close to her later described a household governed by strict rules and routines, which Crawford believed were necessary to prepare her children for a demanding world. Whether these measures were protective or excessive remains a subject of debate. What is clear is that Crawford viewed motherhood through the same lens as her career, as something that required control, image management, and absolute commitment. The gap between public perception and private experience would later become one of the most contested aspects of her legacy, reinvention, and career revival. When her career faltered in the late 1930s and she was labeled box office poison, Joan Crawford once again chose reinvention over surrender. Leaving MGM at a time when few actresses dared to challenge studio power, she took a calculated risk that reshaped her future. Her move to Warner Brothers allowed her greater creative control, and after patiently waiting for the right role, she found it in Mildred Pierce. The performance marked a turning point, earning her an Academy Award and restoring her status as a leading actress. Crawford's portrayal of a woman torn between ambition and motherhood resonated deeply, perhaps because it echoed her own inner conflicts. Though professionally triumphant, the emotional strain never disappeared. She continued to gravitate toward complex roles that reflected isolation and intensity, suggesting that her greatest performances were rooted in personal understanding rather than pure technique. Later, years and shifting power. As Hollywood changed in the 1950s and 1960s, Joan Crawford adapted once more, taking on roles that embraced darker themes and aging with candor rather than denial. Her work in films like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane reintroduced her to a new generation and demonstrated her willingness to confront uncomfortable material. Off-screen, she balanced personal loss with new responsibilities, including her involvement with Pepsi Cola after marrying its CEO. Following his death, she immersed herself in corporate life, channeling her need for structure into business. Yet the cumulative weight of decades in the spotlight took its toll. Friends and colleagues noticed increasing isolation, and Crawford gradually withdrew from public life. By the time she retired, she had lived multiple careers within one lifetime, each shaped by reinvention, resilience, and an unwavering refusal to fade quietly. The will that shocked Hollywood. Joan Crawford's death was expected to bring closure, but the reading of her will instead ignited controversy. The document revealed a deliberate division of her estate that excluded 2 of her adopted children, a decision that stunned both Hollywood and the public. Written in formal legal language, the omission carried emotional weight far beyond finances. For many observers, it challenged the carefully maintained image of family unity Crawford had long projected. Legal disputes followed, drawing private grievances into the spotlight and reopening old wounds. While settlements were eventually reached, the damage to Crawford's posthumous reputation was lasting. The will became a symbol of unresolved conflict, raising difficult questions about control, forgiveness, and final judgment. It suggested that even in death, Crawford remained determined to shape the narrative on her own terms, regardless of how it might be perceived by the world she left behind. Legacy beyond the spotlight. In the years after her passing, stories surrounding Joan Crawford's estate and personal belongings added layers of intrigue to an already complex legacy. Items discovered in her homes fueled speculation and debate, often interpreted through the lens of later memoirs and media portrayals. While some accounts leaned toward sensationalism, they reflected a broader truth. Crawford's life resisted simple explanation. She was neither purely villain nor flawless icon, but a woman shaped by hardship, ambition, and fear of loss. Her legacy continues to provoke strong reactions because it touches on universal themes of survival and control. Joan Crawford built her life through discipline and reinvention, but could never fully escape the scars of her early struggles. In the end, her story remains one of Hollywood's most compelling reminders that greatness often comes at a deeply personal cost.